Guests, ladies and gentlemen, may we have your attention? Please take your seats as conference proceedings are about to commence. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? We would be grateful if you would take a few moments to listen to the following short safety announcement. On hearing the fire alarm, or in the event of an instruction, we would ask everyone to evacuate the building immediately. Staff will be on hand to assist. Please leave in a calm and orderly manner. The fire exits are located in the corners of the room. Please take a moment now to locate the exit closest to you, bearing in mind that it may be behind you. Then make your way to the assembly point at the front of the physics building, located at the car park side of the hall opposite the main building. We would ask you to remain there until instructed otherwise. Please do not attempt to re-enter the building, even if the alarms have been silenced, as this does not always mean that the emergency is over. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask you to silence all mobile phones now for the duration of the session. Thank you for your cooperation.
Guests, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your host, journalist and broadcaster Wendy Austin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with what I hope is a very warm welcome for you on this rather crisp autumn morning. But welcome to my hometown. I was just telling Deborah that I grew up 300 yards away from here and spent the first 20 years of my life within about 500 meters of this lovely campus and beautiful old building. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the first day of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Council's Global Innovation Summit 2024 here in Queen's University Belfast. I'm going to be your host throughout today. It's promising to be a really interesting day with a packed programme of fascinating speakers who'll be sharing their insights and their expertise to demonstrate how innovation is the key to sustainability. So to get the Global Innovation Summit 2024 officially underway, It's my pleasure to introduce our first speakers, and I'm sure you'll want to welcome them too. Please welcome Professor Sir Ian Greer, President and Vice-Chancellor of the Queen's University Belfast, Chad Holliday Jr., Chairman of the GFCC, Deborah Wynne-Smith, President of GFCC and CEO of the Council on Competitiveness, and Dr. Stephen Kingon, Chairman of the Centre for Competitiveness, Northern Ireland. Please welcome.
Good morning. It really is an honour to welcome you all to Queen's University and to this year's Global Innovation Summit. In partnership with the Global Federation for Competitiveness Councils, we're very proud to host this year's summit. It's being held in the island of Ireland for the very first time, and that's a great privilege. Now, Queen's has been a centre of innovation and academic excellence for almost 200 years. Indeed, we celebrate our 180th anniversary just in a few months. In the last century, Belfast was a powerhouse of shipbuilding, linen production and rope making. But today, Northern Ireland has an ever-growing presence in the global economic stage due to its knowledge economy in areas such as cybersecurity. And our graduates, as always, provide a skilled workforce. The theme of this summit, Accelerating Global Sustainability and Economic Inclusion, could not be more relevant as we confront unprecedented global challenges, demanding both bold ideas and collaboration to find solutions. And today we address the critical relationship between innovation and sustainability, where technological advances and creative solutions are key. As you've heard from Wendy, we're privileged to have an absolutely stellar lineup of speakers today, including physicist Professor Brian Cox, AI expert Dr. Daniel Hume, Stephen Gallagher, Director of Strategy and Low Carbon Solutions at SSE Energy, and the Right Honourable the Baroness Minette Batters DL, former President of the National Farmers Union of England and Wales and the UK. So as I conclude, let me take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here, for making this such a fantastic event. And I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to the Global Federation for Competitiveness Councils for their partnership and their vision in making this event possible. And I now invite Chad Holliday Jr., Chairman of the GFCC, to say a few words of welcome. Chad.
Good morning. The Global Federation of Councils on Competitiveness are about 15 years old. We're 35 nations that have representatives that have come together to say, yes, we compete, but we can do so much more by working together and learning from each other. We first started, universities were not a core part of our work, but what we found very early on is universities were critical to our success, and what we had to do. So that's why it's only fitting that we be here with you today, Sir Ian, in this important conference. Now, I want everybody who is a part of the Global Federation and was in our meeting yesterday to please stand up. So everyone who's not standing, sometime during today, seek one of these people out so they can tell you what we're doing with the Global Federation and see if you might want to become part of us or learn from us or teach us something we could use. Thank you very much. Please sit back down. As we enter this session today, we're in a challenging time in the world. In my view, it's really started from the fact that 75 years ago, there were only 2.5 billion of us, and now there's over 8 billion of us. It's getting kind of crowded around here. And we see it in climate, and we see it in a disorderly world in many ways. Yet we see great innovation coming, such as artificial intelligence, that we're just starting to understand the impact it could have, and we have a duty to make sure we use it right. What this conference is about is learning from each other so we can really move forward together. We thank you so much for being here. Let me turn over to Deborah Wynne-Smith, our Chief Executive Officer of the Global Federation and also the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Well, good morning. It's my great honor and privilege on behalf of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils and the U.S. Council on Competitiveness to welcome all of our distinguished leaders, doers, and thinkers from around the world for this 2024 Global Innovation Summit, hosted by our esteemed members, Queen's University and the Center for Competitiveness. Vice Chancellor Greer, Pro-Chancellor Stephen Kingan, thank you so much for your tremendous leadership and commitment to the mission and work of the GFCC and for bringing us here to Belfast. Since its inception in 2010, the Center for Competitiveness has been a founding member of the GFCC, so I'd like to recognize its CEO, Dr. Bob Borber, and its director, Paul Maiden, for their contribution in advancing competitiveness in Northern Ireland, the island writ large, and globally. Our flagship University Leadership Forum, as Chad, our chairman, mentioned, was just founded in 2016 and has been greatly benefited from Sir Ian's active participation in what has become a very unique constellation of university leaders from around the globe, all focused on the pivotal role of universities in generating, yes, new knowledge, performing the cutting-edge research, developing the skills and talent for our next generation of doers and thinkers and leaders, but serving as an anchor in building the economic promise and social cohesion and transformative potential of their respective communities, their regions, the nations, and yes, the world at large. Last year, leaders from the GFCC and the U.S. Council on Competitiveness were greatly honored to participate as a partner in the historic anniversary of the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement at the Agreement 25 conference, so magnificently convened by Queen's University. With our delegation of leaders from industry, business, academia, and national labs, we presented our insights and perspective on how to navigate the next chapter in Northern Ireland's storied legacy as an innovation nation. At the forefront of the first stage of the Industrial Revolution, and now a vibrant, dynamic center of placemaking, innovation, entrepreneurship, and knowledge creation, and the arts and humanities. I know that during our three-day summit, we will have many, many distinguished leaders joining us, including the First Minister of Northern Ireland, the Honourable Michelle O'Neill, and the Deputy Minister, who are working together in a very significant way to develop the policy agenda and initiatives that government can lead here in Northern Ireland. They will, of course, deepen our conversation on this interlinked imperative of sustainability writ large and economic inclusiveness, which has really become the foundation of future economic prowess and prosperity, and yes, security. And we started that conversation yesterday at the annual meeting of the GSCC, hosted at Queen's Business School, and I welcome the business school's participation today as I serve on its Global Advisory Board, and I'm delighted to be part of that group. I just wanted to share with you that I came to Belfast in 2004 with leaders from the U.S. Council on Competitiveness for the inauguration of the Center for Competitiveness, which had just been recently established as a new cornerstone private sector institutional initiative emanating from Intertrade Ireland's new mission under the visionary leadership of its first chairman and champion, Sir Martin Naughton, to forge a new era of all-island collaboration and partnership that would build a next generation of this innovation nation and economy enabled by reconciliation and peace. So one must really look at the continuum of human civilization to fully understand the innovation journeys of respective nations and all of us as individuals, as we co-create, collaborate, and partner together to bring ourselves, our nations, our families, and our friends, as well as allies and others around the world, to deal with these great challenges, seize opportunities, and find solutions in a time of most profound transition, turbulence, and transformation at an epical level. This island and Northern Ireland have always been places where human imagination and creativity, great thinking and risk-taking flourished. From the great Metholithic tomb builders and religious observatory of Newgrange, to the vibrant Bronze Age cultures with their skills in metallurgy, to the people who preserved and translated the wisdom and knowledge of the classical world and laid the foundations leading to the transition from the late Roman Empire to the early medieval time and Christianity. And fast forwarding, this island, this place, led the agriculture and industrial feats as engineers, as shipbuilders, and brought us to the foundation of Ireland's leadership today as an innovation nation. And this is exemplified across many domains, expanding the revolutions that are converging around information technology, its new pathway with augmented intelligence, biotechnology, advances in materials, manufacturing, and with augmented intelligence, the very frontiers of cognitive understanding and performance, bringing us into a new age of illumination. So Belfast is truly a place with a unique cultural and social and economic heritage that blends and bridges the past, the present, and the future. A place that has nurtured and bestowed upon the world many great thinkers, poets, writers, artists, science and engineers, entrepreneurs. At this global summit, we will address the core themes of today's global agenda and competitiveness strategies, from the transformations underway in food production, advanced manufacturing, clean energy, and the list goes on, but all made possible by strategic long-term investments in education and research and development, in the public-private partnerships that forge the collaboration, and very importantly, the enabling conditions that our elected political leaders set for us to prosper and grow our economies. So it is clear why Belfast is the right place at the right time for the GFCC Global Innovation Summit. And I would like to close my remarks by a quote from one of your great, great poets and writers and thinkers, C.S. Lewis, who said, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind. But I will say what we have left behind certainly is what's shaping us and taking us into the future." So I look forward to a wonderful 3 days, and thank you all for hosting us, Sir Ian, in this fabulous Queen's University. Thank you. Now may I introduce Stephen Kingan, the Pro-Chancellor of Queen's and Chairman of the Center for Competitiveness.
Good morning, everyone. Over the next 3 days, we will hear from a range of experts from across the globe about two of the most important matters facing our world today, namely global sustainability and economic inclusion. I would like to thank the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils for choosing to host this annual event in Belfast. I hope those of you who have travelled to be here will enjoy not only the summit itself, but your time exploring the city and beyond. The partnership between Northern Ireland and the Global Federation goes back many years, over 2 decades in fact. When GFCC was formed in 2010, myself and other like-minded Northern Ireland business people were founding members. We continue to work closely with the GFCC to this day by supporting businesses in Northern Ireland to increase productivity, drive quality excellence, and create a culture of innovation. The relationships formed between the Centre for Competitiveness for Northern Ireland, the US Council on Competitiveness, and the GFCC has helped ensure that Northern Ireland is a world leader when it comes to innovation and productivity. Our speakers today will discuss the latest innovations that are transforming industries and paving the way for a greener, more sustainable future. We all know that we have a short opportunity to act decisively and play our part in tackling the climate crisis. This summit stands as a beacon of hope, a forum for us to come together, to learn from one another, share best practice, and create actionable solutions. Sustainability is at the foundation of any future we want to pass on to the next generation. As we confront the reality of climate change, the depletion of natural resources, and the rising inequality, we must be pragmatic about the fact that global sustainability demands more than just environmental protection. It requires an integrated global approach that encompasses economic performance, protection of the environment, and social inclusion. As we begin our discussions today, let us be inspired by the incredible sustainability work already taking place across the globe. Let us use this summit to innovate, collaborate, and problem solve to allow for a future where global sustainability and economic inclusion are the cornerstones of our global competitiveness. Thank you.
That's what you call a pause for effect. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. You don't need to get up yet, but just wanted to say a big thanks to Sireen, Chad, to Deborah, and to Stephen. And it's my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Roberto Alvarez, who's Executive Director of GFCC. And Roberto is going to take us through the agenda and the logistics of the Global Innovation Summit 2024. Roberto.
Change can happen. The world outside is not a given, we can shape it. I'm Roberto Alvarez, I'm the Executive Director of the GFCC. It's a pleasure to be here in Belfast for the second time in my life. This is a city and this is a part of the world that is changing, and is changing in a positive way. We heard that a lot yesterday during the GFCC annual meeting. Under the leadership of Deborah and Chad Holliday, the GFCC has moving forward an agenda that wants to build prosperity. There are three themes that we are using to organize this conference today in the amazing partnership with Queen's University Belfast and the Center for Competitiveness. The first one is sustainability. As was just said, we need to think sustainability as the intersection of the environment, society, and the economy. The second thing is inclusiveness. And this is really about the most relevant assets and the most underutilized assets that we have in the world today. It's about human capacity. How can we bring human capacity into the innovation economy? We will not do that alone, as I heard from you, Sireen, yesterday. We need engagement. We need partnerships. The 3 days of this conference are organized around those three themes: innovation, inclusiveness, and partnerships. There are 4 types of activities. We will have keynotes. We start big today, and I'll comment a bit about that. We have panel conversations. We have a series of workshops in which we want to count on you to come up with new ideas, maybe new solutions for the challenges, and to leverage the opportunities that we have in the world. We'll have Dr. Paul Maiden from the Center for Competitiveness introducing our workshops later today. And we'll have a series of conversations. If you want to know more about the agenda, I know that all of you have a document with you. You can also point your mobile phones to this QR code. There you'll find a full agenda with the bios of everybody who's speaking at this conference, including the various GFCC members from 35 countries that our chairman mentioned today. In that link, you have this extensive agenda. In this first day, we're highlighting sustainability. We're talking natural resources, energy, decarbonization. We're getting started with a leadership panel that Deborah Winston-Smith will conduct. But before that, we'll start with a view about the universe. We're starting big, and we are finishing the day with a wrap-up about maybe some concrete solutions that we can adopt here on Earth. In the following days, we'll continue with our agenda, talking inclusiveness tomorrow and talking partnerships in the following day. This summit also includes a series of visits to different sites here in Northern Ireland and in Belfast. Here are some of them for those who are here, especially our colleagues from around the globe in the GFCC. We would very much like you to join us in that part of the conversation. In a few minutes today, you will hear about the GFCC 2024 call to action. If you go to that QR code that I just showed you, you will also find this document, and we'll hear more about it today. As Deborah and Chad said, we've been convening the GFCC in various parts of the world. Yesterday, we had an amazing and deep conversation about our call to action, and we hope that in this city, in this part of the world that is changing, you can join us in action. Please join us for the GFCC, Queen's University of Belfast, Center for Competitiveness 2024 Global Innovation Summit. Thank you.
Roberto, thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you very much again to Sir Ian, to Chad, to Deborah and Stephen. Thank you. We're just going to do a wee bit of rearranging up here. Deck chairs in the Titanic and all that. I shouldn't really say that, should I, in the Belfast context? Just a reminder too, if you're looking for some water, there's water in the foyer at the back, and there's kind of coffee on tap all day in the South Dining Hall, which is out this way, which is where you would have been before you came in here today. That should keep you, well, maybe not well fed, but certainly well watered. And I think there's some quite nice shortbread biscuits too, so that's a bit of a bonus. Martin is very kindly reorganizing this because we have a bit of a star coming on stage now. Over the years, there have been quite a few stars in this hall. I'm sure many of you will have heard Jimi Hendrix played here. I wasn't here, but I was sitting on the wall outside because my mum and dad wouldn't let me go. Julie Felix, and I saw Nina Simone play here, who was pretty awesome. However, we have a star from our own galaxy today as the first keynote speaker of this year's Global Innovation Summit, Professor Brian Cox. Now, Brian brings scientific discovery to life for millions through his out-of-this-world talks about the universe. And having seen a couple of weeks ago what acid rain on Venus does to organic matter like you and me, I've already decided not to go there. Today, though, we're taking a different trip, as Brian will be setting out the case for why coordinated investment in science is key to job creation and growth. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor start our day and to really kick off this summit. So thank you very much indeed again, Professor Brian Cox. I'm sure he can still hear, so thank you very much. Now, I'm delighted to introduce you now to the first panel of the Global Innovation Summit, discussing accelerating global sustainable development goals and economic inclusiveness. Leading and moderating this conversation is Deborah L. Wince-Smith, and Deborah will introduce each panelist in more detail. But please, in the meantime, would you please join me in welcoming Luzin Basha, Antonis Sagris, Chad Holliday, Charles Kiefer, Professor Miguel Marquez, and, as I said, Deborah L. Wince-Smith. Thank you very much indeed.
A bit late.
Well, that was an incredible talk. We heard some of it while we were waiting to come on, but I think it was so inspiring. And I have to make one comment before we start our panel on sustainability and competitiveness, and that is, I mentioned Newgrange, and for those of you who haven't been there, when you enter the Passage Tomb, there's the spiral of life. And when I saw the Storm Galaxy with the yellow center, I don't know if you all noticed, it was the shape of a spiral. So there's something going on in nature and spirituality, and Brian's talk was superb. Well, we have a fantastic panel of leaders that are going to discuss kind of their competitiveness agenda in their respective nations, but bring it to the imperative for sustainability. I will just quickly introduce them. The Honorable Luzin Basha, who's a member of the Parliament and chairman of the Democratic Party of Albania, and founder of the Albanian Council on Competitiveness. Let me introduce as well Mr. Antonio Sagris, who's the head of Group Corporate Development and ESG at Greece's largest bank, Piraeus Bank. On my right, you know, our chairman of the GIFCC, Chad Holliday. He's also chairman emeritus of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, former chairman of Royal Dutch Shell, Bank of America, and CEO and chairman of DuPont, and a very early leader in sustainability. Charles Kiefer is the founder of the Australian Advisory Board on Competitiveness, as well as the chairman of Principles Fund Management, and is the new vice chairman of the GFCC. And then Professor Miguel Marquez is vice rector of Catholic University of Portugal and vice chair of the board of Galp Energia in Portugal, their largest energy company. So let me just start, and maybe we'll go with you, Miguel. Just share with us a little bit about how you see the competitiveness situation in Portugal, maybe just one or two priorities that you are addressing from the perspective of your nation in Europe.
Thank you, Deborah. First, it's a great pleasure to be here in this magnificent hall where I hear it is the venue for the graduation ceremony. So it's the passing from student to real-life professional, and that's what we'll be talking here today, is how does a professional make an impact in today's world. So, you know, the competitiveness today cannot be dissociated from the sustainability issue. When Deborah asks what are the main vectors of competitiveness, we are here talking about sustainability, and sustainability has different facets. It has to do with preserving the environment. It has to do with finding the balances in the social fabric and achieving inclusiveness. And it has also to do with creating the economic activity, enough economic activity to generate wealth and value to be redistributed in society. So these are great challenges. And I think when we think of competitiveness today, yes, we think about technology, we think about innovation, we think about resources, we think about strategy, but first and foremost, we must think about sustainability, because if we don't, we won't survive.
Charles, you are a leader in finance and investment, but you had the vision to establish the Australian Advisory Board on Competitiveness. Share with us a little bit about some of the challenges in Australia, and maybe including the productivity issues and others, including your use of your energy resources and sustainability.
Thank you, Deborah. And congratulations and thanks to Queen's University for organising this, and also the team at the GFCC, led most ably by Chad and Deborah and Roberto and Chad Evans as well. And also thank you all for coming out today. It's beautiful, cool weather here. In Australia, where it's starting to get warmer, we have two main areas of need for productivity improvements. Australia's productivity is poor. It should be one of the highest. We'd like to benchmark ourselves on the United States that have very good productivity. But Australia's two areas of productivity which are weak are public sector productivity, and the second is raw material productivity, being uranium. We've got a third of the world's supply of uranium, a third of the world's supply, 4,800 metric tons of uranium, is sitting idle in the ground, not utilised. That does make sense. All over the world in the energy transition, we all know that uranium results in zero emissions, or minimal emissions, much less than others, and it's baseload. It's durable, safe and sustainable. So there we have in Australia all this uranium sitting idle in the ground when we could be selling it to, we do know also some of our allies for example, the United States, understand from the new administration under President Trump, congratulations to him, they're looking at building another, I've been told, Bose at the US Council Competitiveness meeting, over 30 new uranium enrichment plants now. Where are they going to get the uranium from? So they can get it from Australia because we are an ally and we are very loyal to our allies, and particularly the link with the United States. For example, AUKUS, where we have an alliance with the United Kingdom and the United States in building nuclear submarines. So we do have nuclear submarines in Australia, so I don't see why we can't have, if we have nuclear submarines to defend our nation, we can't use nuclear to provide cheap energy. Now, all over the world, we are seeing people reaching for more uranium or nuclear power plants, and Australia can supply that uranium. So that's one. The other is gas, and so over 1,000 years of gas sitting idle as well in our country. And the main area, I think, in Australia is a structural state of the budget, and I can talk more about this later, Deborah, if you like, but definitely public sector productivity needs to be improved, but that is weak.
Thank you, Charles. Chad, when I first met you, when you were CEO and chairman of DuPont, you were one of the early leaders in making the business case for sustainability as core to your business, your productivity. You went on to be a leader in the Sustainable Business Council at the United Nations, Energy for All, and you know, I think that linkage between sustainability as a productivity driver and the energy transformation, I can't think of anybody better that would talk about what the real challenges are in reaching our climate and energy abundance goals.
Deborah, thanks very much, and it's so good to be here today. In looking at the title of our talk today, it talks to the Sustainable Development Goals, and I was on an assignment, as you mentioned, from the Secretary General of the UN, co-chairing Sustainable Energy for All at the time the goals were set. And we had to argue very hard to get goal number 7 in there, which is around energy. It seemed like it was obvious to us. It wasn't obvious to everybody else. But the challenge of getting sustainable energy for all is obviously kind of a main challenge for our time. I think what I learned from that experience is with the 8 billion people in the world today, they are not very satisfied to make massive sacrifices now because 30 years from now, the climate will be better. It will be different. They want to see progress now, but they all want to see a little more energy now too, on both stents. And Condi Mkela, my co-chair, every time he'd go home to Sierra Leone and come back, he would bring pictures of young women that were having to carry firewood for an hour or two at a time every day, because that was the energy they had at that point in time. It hasn't been that long ago. I recall very much on one time he had this picture and he was showing me this young woman and a little tear came down from his eye. And I said, Condi, why did this one move you so much more than the others? He said, that's my niece that's carrying the wood. I can't do anything to even help my niece. So I think this really caring about the people now, it has to be a key part of what we're doing. And I think that's left out of the conversation so much. One thing we found from that work, in closing, Deborah, is that energy efficiency is there to be had. And we don't have to have only great inventions of new energy systems. We can use the energy we have much better today and make sustainable progress today as we speak.
Thank you, Chad. And we'll come back to the concept of energy's everything and how it's linked so profoundly to growth and productivity. And when you led that work at the United Nations, you also were very much involved in the COP and the setting the climate goals. Do you feel optimistic that we're going to move forward on that, or because of energy scarcity and poverty, we're going to see a backtracking on those goals?
I think we have to have new approaches, and when we come up with those new approaches and we find ways to work together, we can make tremendous progress toward those goals. I'm not hopeful it will necessarily come this week, but the need for this is so universal that I have long-term very optimistic.
Thank you. Antonios, you are at the Piraeus Bank in Greece. I know that your bank and leadership, Christos Megalou, who's a member of the Piraeus Bank's a member of the GIF2024, you've played a leading role in the whole economic revitalization of Greece coming out of the crisis, and you're also the leader in sustainability investments. But share a little bit about how you see the Greek economy now and going forward, and then we'll talk about energy and sustainability.
Very delightful to be here. As you know, Christos has this vision. He's an ESG missionary. And there are times where he wants to challenge our strategy, so he goes ahead. We've been doing a lot, so let's make it a competitive advantage. And I think it is a competitive advantage having sustainability in everyday operations. It's very important that we as banks have a very institutional role to play. We have a big presence in various vital sectors of the Greek economy, like agriculture, the energy sector, transportation as well. So all these sectors are hard to abate climate change, and they have a very good presence. As a bank, we have to support those transition plans. There are targets, there are ambitious targets, there is a plan, we know where to get there, and I think the technology is there to help us. So I think a cooperation with various institutions, banks, communities, academics, we can take things a little bit further than if we do it alone.
Thank you. And I know that the bank has been very innovative in how you're making investments in the foundational new clean energy technologies that are particularly important to Greece, the sun, the water, and the wind. Could you share a little bit about your role in that financing that's so critical?
Well, it is challenging, you know, having a strategy and saying that it's a unique opportunity for a Greek economy, a small economy, to be energy efficient, to be energy autonomy. It's a national security matter as well. Having a bank and having Greek banks that can support and finance these type of projects is also important for the Greek economy. We had our ups and downs. Actually, we hit rock bottom back in 2015. There was only one way, and the only way was the way up. So building a resilient model, economic model, and these type of activities, investing in different sectors that have a longevity ahead, that can produce some economic growth, but also have an impact in the community, society, and the environment is quite important and resilient.
Thank you. Luzim, you have had a very noteworthy career as a political leader. You're a member of parliament, as I said, business leader, and then you founded the Albanian Council on Competitiveness. Just share with us why you chose competitiveness as one of your priorities as a government leader, and at some point in the past and in the future will be Prime Minister of Albania.
Thank you, Deborah. It's great to be here, and I want to thank you and Chad and the Global Council of Competitiveness Councils, and of course the hosts, Queen's University. We just had a marvelous presentation by Brian Cox, very inspiring. And I think we saw within that very complex presentation also a dimension of competitiveness in the universe. I have encompassed in my life two very different periods: communist Albania, no competition, terrible results, and open Albania, where competitivity and free initiative have built the country basically from scratch. But there's a lot to do. So I was very enthusiastic when your organization invited and helped us form the Albanian Council on Competitiveness, because we strongly believe that we are at the dawn of a new age where proper use of transparent competitive practices can give the best results to the economy and to the consumers, in particular when it comes to green energy transition, but also to innovation. Now, if I am to stop for a second there, Albania has an advantage. Almost 99% of our energy is green. It's produced from hydropower. But it has to gap a disadvantage in terms of embracing innovation. And that's why we believe that one of the most important political decisions to be made and to be implemented is meaningful cooperation between the private sector and universities in order not only to induce better innovation, better research, but also to prepare the younger generations for a completely different approach, which will entail lifelong learning, an affinity for technology, and in particular artificial intelligence, as well as cooperation in order to increase productivity while embracing a sustainable approach, both in terms of energy sufficiency as well as technological and IT advancement.
Thank you. And on the issue of investments in innovation, you have a mix of public and private universities in Albania, which does not exist yet in Greece, but I think you will at some point, which is interesting. Just share with us a little bit about how you see and what's going on in the collaboration between your universities and the Albanian private sector, and perhaps through the lens of energy and sustainability.
There is a lot to be done, but the very cohabitation of public and private universities is a good first step. When it started, many people were skeptical. Now private universities account for about 35% of the total share of graduates, while in terms of research and innovation, in many cases they are the leaders because of uninhibited cooperation with the private sector, including in green energy transformation. One of the private universities is the leader in Albania, so recognized also by the European Union, in research and development to improve both the technical and the financial aspects of energy isolation, both in industrial construction as well as in consumer behavior in terms of isolation of their homes or their apartments in order to make them more sustainable. So I give you this example. The other example that I'm very proud to flaunt everywhere I am is that of leaders in the AI, Mira Murati, the longtime Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, the author of ChatGPT, is an Albanian young lady who left Albania at the young age of 16, has embraced the advantages of Western education, but is now helping bring back to Albania a model that will make it possible for thousands of young men and women to become versatile in IT and in AI adaptive training courses.
Do you think OpenAI and Mir will come back to Albania and build one of the data centers for the large language models? Do you have enough electricity for them?
Well, we definitely have to produce more electricity for that, but the aim is to make the best out of this huge potential, in particular of Albanians who live out of the country. I'm sure people in Northern Ireland and in Ireland and in the UK know a little bit about this as well, but also in Greece. The aim is to bridge that gap, to have a quantum leap, and the ambition is to have Albania lead in the Western Balkans in this area.
Thank you. Miguel, share with us a little bit about the strategy and the work underway at Católica University in Lisbon in the blue economy and merging it with the green economy, and the strategic advantages that Portugal has to be a leader in that integration of the blue and green economy, which again is at the heart of sustainability.
My university, Católica, in Lisbon, in Portugal, has set sustainability as a very important priority. It has embedded in its strategy and plans the sustainability issue, not only in the environmental side, but also in the social side. And, of course, we are talking about ESG, so we didn't forget the G part of sustainability. And the G part of sustainability is governance, top-down organization, but it's also an attitude, it's also a code of ethics, it's also the values of the university which are embedded in the G part, or indeed of any organization. So as a starting point, we actually included all these issues in our strategy, and also we introduced new curricula and new courses across all our faculties, across all our schools, and there are 15 different schools, from medicine to business administration and law and so on and so forth, biotechnology and so on. So all these faculties now offer compulsory contents on the UN topics related to the UN sustainability and the global, the sustainable goals, the global sustainable goals. So this is a starting point. Now, what can we do in order to transform reality? Universities or any institution of higher education is open to the world. We are not anymore an institution, any university is not anymore an institution to serve only the local community as they were in the past. Today, universities are global institutions that attract students and faculty around the world. In my case, in Católica, in Lisbon, 82% of our students at the master's level are non-Portuguese. They came to study in Portugal, and they come from 42 countries at the moment. So this means that we are really open, and what we can do in preparing young generations for the future is not circumscribed to our own geographic proximity. It is an effort that we take beyond our geography into the world, and that's the responsibility of the universities. I'm very glad, I'm very happy and grateful for the GFCC to bring the university side into this discussion that we do within GFCC and the Global Innovation Summits, as Deborah and Chad pointed out in their inaugural speeches. What can we do in terms of advancing knowledge? We have to concentrate on strengths. We are not strong from A to Z. We have to concentrate on what we do best. So we try to bring our skills in areas where we are highly ranked in international indices, like the Financial Times ranks, and bring together different scientific approaches. In other words, we have two schools in Católica University, one in Lisbon and one in Porto, which are business schools, which are among the only 120 schools that are triple accredited, the Triple Crown, and that attracts a lot of attention from students that want to come to Lisbon to study in our university. So we try to bring together the business school with the law school, with technology like biotechnology, with health sciences, and offer multidisciplinary knowledge. So I think we've passed the stage of having silos. This is business, this is law, this is science. You know, to have a complete education, we try to bring together all these aspects with a focus, not unfocused, with a focus, but on an interdisciplinary way. I think that's the best way to prepare citizens for the future.
Thank you. Well, we have three leaders in finance and investment. Charles, you served on the board of the Superfund, and Chad, you were chairman of Bank of America, and of course, Antonia, you're involved in Piraeus Bank's investments, and financing is critical for this energy transformation, including financing SMEs, but the large-scale financing that must be done for the transformation. Charles, I want to start with you, and then turn to you, Chad and Antonia. How does the Superfund and the Australian incredible base of sovereign wealth fund, how are they being used to invest in the energy transformation?
A very good question, Deborah. Well, firstly, before I answer that, I think we should express some gratitude to a number of people, apart from obviously Serene Greer for all of the wonderful leadership he's provided. And also, I should mention Elaine too. I didn't mention Elaine in our team for all the work she's done, which is terrific. Also welcome the boys from the Scots College Sydney, who are here under the protection and well-being of Ryan Starr from the Scots College Sydney. And youth leadership is very important. When we talk about education, it's an older group, but youth leaders they're the future of our country and the world, and that's why we want to encourage youth leadership, and that's essential. If they can work and do good for their communities and country and grow wealth in our country, they're really the future, and that's why we encouraged the boys from the Scots College Sydney to come here. So on the question of superannuation pension fund, it's basically the word for pension funds. And Australia has the third largest fully funded pension fund industry, as well as a very large sovereign wealth fund, which is the Future Fund of Australia, which is funded at $280 billion, and Australian Super is the largest with $360 billion, which will grow to $1 trillion by 2032. But Australia's super fund industry is $4 trillion. It's larger than the GDP of Australia. GDP of Australia is about 3.4 trillion. It's very large. But the allocation of money, that's really what you're asking, Deborah. How do super funds allocate assets? Roughly 50% is allocated, depends on the demographic profile of the super fund. The demographic profile of a super fund will determine the optimal asset allocation. If you're a young fund, they can invest in more growth assets. It's an older fund, they tend to be more defensive, in more cash and more defensive assets. If you're a sovereign wealth fund, which is in perpetuity, they have very much an absolute return strategy and should always make money for their members, who are ultimately the taxpayer, every year, where the pension funds represent the members who have a demographic profile. So in Australia, if you're looking at a super fund on average, the balanced fund, is that what you're asking? About 50% is listed, then an allocation of about 20% is alternatives, which includes
and how are
infrastructure
they
and energy.
Great,
yes.
great. You're
so we
getting
get to
that.
energy, you'd need to have an internal rate of return of about 8 to 10% on equity. Geared up, it's about 15, 16%. So that's a sort of benchmark. So the commercial sector rate of return is required because there is competition between capital. There's competition between asset classes. There's competition between managers. So the key to structuring optimally and pricing an asset is to have a rate of return which is benchmarked, which would be best practice globally. And that's the way capital is attracted. Now, if you have a cost of capital, which represents about 30% of the cost of a business, and the cost of capital or materials, which is another major part of a business structure, if that's cheaper, Australia has very fortunate because we have a huge abundance of capital with the superannuation industry, as I said, $4 trillion. Then you've got the uranium assets and gas assets. Coupled with those too, we have a major competitive advantage in Australia. Already in gas, they supply Australia lots of gas for Japan, and uranium, we could supply uranium to a lot of allies around the world, so we are lucky. We should have the lowest electricity prices in the world, in Australia, and of course in investments, that the mobilisation of the capital can underwrite the transition in energy quite comfortably.
Great. And Chad, as chair of Bank of America, one of our largest, most profitable and strategic banks, you and our chairman of the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, Brian Moynihan, again, were leaders in the financing of sustainability. The Sustainability Financing Initiative was highlighted last year at COP28 in our innovation arena. So share with us a little bit how pivotal the role of large-scale banks are in financing the transition, but also in ensuring that it's done in a clean, sustainable way as we move into the future.
As you look at the COP that's going on this week, you hear more and more requests for governments to give away money to help nations. There's a limit to how much they have available and how much they can give away. So I think the fundamental way we solve this is have profitable projects that people could invest from the private sector. And so if we try to do it any other way, it just won't work. And so that's the fundamental thing that Bank of America and all the other major institutions have to come back to, is how do we make them profitable projects, and then they're investable. There's plenty of money out there for good projects. If I could drift slightly from your question, if you don't mind. I was sitting here in this hall today, and I had this flashback of a time 30 years ago. I was taking the then CEO of DuPont in to see the president of China. Because we were in a hall with a ceiling about this tall. It was a lot bigger hall, about 50% bigger, and there were only 10 of us sitting in a little horseshoe at the end of the room. So it's the CEO's first trip to China. So Jiao Zemin, the president, said through an interpreter, have we met before? And that kind of threw my CEO off a little bit. He said, it was my first trip to China, highly unlikely, politically correct. I don't know if I met you or not, but I sure don't want to embarrass you here. And they came out okay, but kind of timid. Then Jiao Zemin, in perfect English, says, well, I sure don't know, because all you Americans look alike to me. I tell that story because the next hour was in that mode. Jiao Zemin was going in and out of English to Chinese. We wanted to make sure it was right. And he sent us two very important messages. First, the direction for China is we're going to move closer and closer to a free market society, and it will always be called communism. And if I look back over the last 30 years, exactly what they've done, no matter who was president. But the second thing he said, to keep our billion-plus people with us, every year they have to have a little more food, a little better clothing, a little better housing. And if we're not making constant progress, they won't stay with us. So I think, going back, Deborah, to the overall theme of this discussion, I want to come back to the point that we have to be thinking about the masses of people that have to be making a little progress all the time while we deal with these big, massive problems. Thank you.
And the whole concept at the heart of global competitiveness in our council is that thriving and flourishing is essential for any concept of sustainability and placemaking innovation. We don't have too much time, so I want to just have my colleagues here think a little bit about, as we come to a conclusion, of what they think are really a great challenge, but a huge opportunity in a positive sense of advancing this nexus of sustainability and inclusivity. We know there's energy poverty around the world, energy scarcity, but how can we move more towards abundance and flourishing? And in Greece, you know, the economy is so much based on small family enterprises. The cost of energy has skyrocketed because of geopolitical and other reasons. And you do have a lot of people who are struggling. How are you, as a bank, you know, transversing that continuum of wanting to invest in the future, but making sure that people have assets that they can carry on their life with?
That's a very good question. It's what keeps us up at night as well, because large enterprises have their plans already. They have their investment plans. They know where they're heading. Smaller companies and SMEs and professionals see it as an OpEx kind of a turnaround. We have to change that mentality. It's more or less turning to a more CapEx intensive model. There's some benefits to them as well. They invest this money, they're going to get something in return. They have to understand it. Greece, unfortunately, had the experience of a prolonged financial crisis, a prolonged economic crisis. We were in a survival mode. So things weren't as mature as we would have liked to do some steps ahead. We see now all the businesses that have survived that crisis have done a good job. They adapted to new conditions. And that's a very good lesson ahead, because they can rely on that experience and look at the future with a broader spectrum.
Thank you. And you have really raised the topic, and I'll turn to Chad Holliday on this in a moment as well. But first, Lucian, you innovated out of the crisis of the communist totalitarian state in Albania. Talk a little bit about what coming out of a crisis and resiliency means, because that's a hallmark of the work of the GFCC and what we have done in partnership with the Japan Science and Technology Agency, innovating out of crisis, but the pioneer work of the U.S. Council on enterprise resiliency, because resiliency is at the heart of these issues as well.
Well, I'd break it into two stages. The first stage was, of course, to let the people lead in a society where a single party system, the Communist Party, had been leading and making practically all the decisions. Have faith in people, let the people lead. That's what brought Albania out of the abyss of communism. In 35 years, built a competitive economy. But there is also time for policymakers to lead in cooperation with the academia, with universities, and that time is now, to formulate policies that will allow people to again lead with their private initiative as well as protect their private wealth, their way of life, their homes, their families, and in particular, if I may very shortly, when we talk about inclusiveness of sustainability. Now, we know we are here at the nexus of the European Union and the UK. You know, further south, the Republic of Ireland, a member of the EU, here, the UK, both the EU and the UK have approved transformative policy agendas, very well financed, for the transition to renewable energy, to circular economy. But only a few of the governments of the EU have taken active steps to pass cost reductions to the consumers. And this is something that we are now eyeing as a candidate country who has initiated negotiations for full membership in the EU. We have to make the people feel, also the consumers, not only the entrepreneurs, to feel that they are the end benefactors of sustainability. And this way, I believe we will increase not simply awareness, but also the chances for success and higher productivity, while sustainability becomes our way of life.
Thank you. Chad, you pioneered, when you were chairman of the U.S. Council, this triad of innovation capacity, sustainability, and enterprise resiliency as an integrated complex system for growth and prosperity. Share with us a little bit about how the resiliency that's built into whether it's government, private sector, academia, society at large, is absolutely critical if we're going to move forward on sustainability and benefits for all.
Yeah, Deborah, as you'll recall, that early work with the U.S. Council on Competitiveness came after the September 11 tragedy with the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, et cetera, and we were caught so surprised by that. So the first work of the commission that you established was to see if we could, predict the next one. And after massive efforts to try to predict the next one turned out to be the great financial crisis, and it wasn't even on our bucket list of things that would come up. So what we concluded is our ability to predict the next one was just not there. And what we had to have, as you described, is resilience in all of our systems. And so we went back and tracked every major crisis that's happened, including weather events, which we're seeing more and more of. It's the resilient systems that can hold up and make a difference. And so that's what we should work on now rather than trying to pick out the next one. We got to make sure we have resilient systems. Very simple things is you need an IT system that's not maxed out. It's got to have some ability to work. You have to have a little extra inventory strategically placed in the right places where you can get to it. Very simple things that just efficiency would drive you away from and lowest investment cost, but in the long run, it's better.
And our report even predicted a health pandemic and how it would impact supply chains. And of course, we heard yesterday in our meeting from our colleagues in Malaysia, they as well, but the world didn't listen. So how can we do a better job of embedding enterprise resiliency as core to the innovation sustainable future so we don't experience the same thing over and over again?
Well, I think we need to hold our leaders accountable for that. Yeah, they don't get a free pass because they didn't plan for it. And I think after every one of these, we need to go back and give a report card, if you will, to the leaders that were in charge, be it government or private sector. How well did they do? That'll encourage more in the future.
And I know, and shortly we're going to talk about the 2024 call to action of the GFCC and have a little bit more conversation around that issue. Well, in the time we have left, I'd just like each of us on the panel to articulate one action that you're taking in your respective country to really move forward on this transition in energy sustainability, but very importantly, how to deliver benefit in a flourishing society. So we'll start with you, Miguel, and then go to Lucia. I'll mix it up a little bit here.
There's one thing that is a great challenge for institutions of higher education. What is it beyond being relevant and being useful to society? It is to be able to predict the jobs and the skills of the future. This is really difficult. You know, according to the World Economic Forum, 65% of children who start primary school today will work on jobs that do not exist now. 65%. So when we plan new buildings, new infrastructures, we have to be flexible in order them to accommodate the pedagogy that will be needed for training the people for the jobs and the knowledge of the future. And the work environment will be very different. No more stable employment. We are moving quickly into flexible careers, part-time. We are seeing we are seeing a very widespread need for skills where the commodity will be transferring from human knowledge into AI machines and robots. So what will be distinguishing the human race will be the span and the depth of knowledge for which universities have to be able to respond.
So this theme of human-centered development and is really a cross-cut for everything. So maybe we'll just stick with that. Luzim, you, in your last remark, tell us something about, why people matter the most and what you're doing in Albania. Very fast, lightning rod.
The most important thing is to prepare the new generation and the generations to come for this AI-driven world. The black hole with the information, as Brian Cox put it, to see ourselves as maybe that black hole with opportunities gravitating, but we have to let that information out of the black hole. Quantum computing will help, AI will help, but it is important to create the vectors for this energy, for this knowledge to be absorbed by the younger generations, and that is where our focus is. Our most ambitious program in Albania is that over the in the coming 4 years, the main universities in Albania should be capable, through the help of the Mira Muratis of the world, but not only Albanians, but the brightest minds in Europe and the US, to educate up to 25,000 young men and women, Albanians, but also from the region, also from Europe, to embrace digital literacy, coding, AI adaptation, prepare for a whole new bright world.
Thank you. And Antonio, in Greece, in Piraeus Bank, you have such talent. University of Petra, you have very advanced data rooms. You're really a technological leader. So Greece has a surfeit of smart, wonderful people. How are you working now to make sure that the whole society is flourishing?
Well, one thing is we're looking for a profile of people, of young executives that can have a sustainability focus. Actually, our CEO was proud to collaborate with a university in Greece in creating business administration, a master's in business administration with a focus in sustainability. And it was a public university. So things are taking part, but we have to cooperate together in order to make it so.
Radical collaboration. Charles, 1 minute or less, and then our chairman, Chad Holliday, will conclude.
What would you like me to answer?
People. How important are people?
Well, you're very important. I mean, we have to admire the vision of Deborah. And talking about dynamic adaptability, like Manny Pohl's great firm, who are rated #1, he has dynamic adaptability as part of his ESG analysis of stocks, in picking the best stocks. I think the bottom line is, you're talking about what Australia should do or what we should do. Well, obviously, two things. One is to be more productive, because productivity equals efficiency, equals profitability, equals wealth creation, which equals more jobs and a better standard of living for all people, okay?
Yes.
So to do that, one, you need more nuclear power and unlock the idle, unproductive capacity in the
We're going to remember the nuclear power. Thank you.
Number two is become more productive in the private sector. And particularly make the public sector more productive, but certainly the private sector should prevail over the public sector. Because
so productivity
Correct.
is everything, as energy is anything.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Our chairman, Chad Holliday.
I think everyone in the room has taken a commercial airline flight, and you wouldn't be shocked to know that your pilots had to go back for regular training. In that training, they refreshed on skills they might have become weak in, and at the same time, they learned what was new. To be successful in the world we're going to be in today, we're all going to have to do exactly that. And our educational system has got to adapt to that constant learning, because things are moving so fast, we'll need it.
Well, you make me say that line that I wish I had created, but someone else did. I don't know who. Maybe someone does. We didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. And on that note, I want to thank our fantastic leadership panel on sustainability.
Deborah and our wonderful panel, thank you so much for all of your insight. Thank you to Luzin, to Antonis, Chad, Charles, and Miguel, and of course, Deborah Winsmith. Thank you very much. Now, as a result of some excellent planning, that conversation around technological advancements sets us up very nicely for our next speaker. I don't think there's any business or academic gathering that takes place nowadays at which artificial intelligence is not a hot topic. So when I saw that our next speaker is Daniel Hume, I asked ChatGPT how to introduce him. So ChatGPT said, to introduce AI expert Daniel Hume, you'll want to highlight his expertise, his contributions to the AI field, and his professional background in a concise yet engaging way. Here's an example of how you could introduce him. Now, I've cut it down a bit because concise wasn't quite the word, but so it says, introducing Daniel Hume. Daniel Hume is a renowned AI expert and thought leader in the field of artificial intelligence and its real-world applications. He's the CEO of Satalia, a cutting-edge AI company that leverages machine learning and optimization to solve complex business challenges. With a deep understanding of AI, data science, and machine learning, Daniel has dedicated his career to harnessing the power of AI to drive innovation and improve decision-making across industries. And as an advocate for responsible AI development, Daniel is passionate about addressing the ethical implications of emerging technologies and ensuring AI's positive impact on society. I think I've made myself redundant. But please, would you welcome Daniel Hume to explore the key issues emerging alongside the rise of AI and digitalization.
All right. Okay, yes, we're going to talk about AI. I want to give you a different framework to think about AI and how it applies to your businesses, your lives. And we'll also talk about how we can bring people and technology together to do amazing things, as well as the macro impact that these technologies are going to have on society. So it's going to get quite philosophical. I've been involved in AI for 25 years. My undergraduate PhD postdocs were all in AI from UCL. I'm currently an entrepreneur in residence for UCL, so I help them spin out deep tech companies like DeepMind. It keeps me honest. I started a company about 17 years ago that's been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world. I sold that company to WPP, which ChatGPT doesn't know. WPP is the biggest marketing company in the world. I sold that company 3 years ago, where I'm now coordinating AI across about 120,000 people. And I've just started a research organization to solve machine consciousness, which maybe we'll talk about later on as well. So that's me, it's boring. Let's talk about, that clicker's not working. Is there a clicker that works? Point it at you? No. No, is there a clicker that works? No clicker? Yes? It's clicking, it's not working. Is there a press? Click, click, click. No? Oh, there we go, that's me. Okay, so let's talk about AI. The AI is already sabotaging my presentation. So I guess for the past decade, organizations have been getting very excited about data. They've been building data lakes, putting some sort of analytics layer on top and hoping that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it's led to better decisions. If I'm honest with you, giving human beings better insights doesn't typically lead to better decisions. Human beings are not very good at decision making, and I would argue that companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems. Decision making is a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. I would argue that you always start with the decision problem first and then work backwards. Don't start with data and work up. Anyway, I'm sure you've read the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and he argues we have a fast brain and a slow brain. And this will help you illustrate how rubbish humans are at decision-making. I'm going to ask you some maths questions, and your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible. Okay? We're going to start out nice and easy. Don't worry, we'll get more and more complicated. Don't be shy. So the first question is... Okay, good. Okay, what's 14 times 60? Okay, so the point here is this one you use your fast brain, you didn't need to think about it, use your intuition. This one you have to go through a process, an algorithm to come up with the right answer. I'm going to ask you a few more maths questions. Again, we'll start out nice and easy, we'll get more complicated. So slightly different context, nice and easy. The combined price of a bat and a ball is €1.10. The bat is €1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? If you said 5 cents, you knew the answer already. If you said 10 cents, you're not broken. It's not 10 cents. The bat is €1.05. The ball is 5 cents. The combined price is €1.10. This is where we sometimes use our intuition and we get things wrong. We're using our intuition every single day, confidently making incorrect decisions. So imagine you've got a delivery van, and your delivery van has to deliver packages around these 24 points around London. Now, humans are quite good at solving these spatial problems. After a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. Now, how long will it take a computer to get the shortest path? The one that's going to save the most amount of time, petrol? How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path? Seconds? Somewhere between seconds and 20 billion years. If you put 24 times 23 times 22 times 20 into your calculator, you get this number of routes. That's how many routes there are around 24 points. If you had a computer that could check 1 million routes a second, it would take 20 billion years, longer than the age of the universe, to go through every single possible one and say, this one that I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one, you should do that. And if I had another point in the map, it becomes 25 times 20 billion years, 5,000 billion years. If I had another point in the map, it becomes 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get ugly very, very quickly. One of my clients is Tesco. They're delivering to 200,000 points in the map a day. 200,000 factorial. We don't have gazillions of years to solve that problem. We have milliseconds between each customer coming in to request slots, choose a slot, optimizing those schedules so we can show more slots to the next customer. Algorithms are a differentiator for your business. So if I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? What's the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would argue, controversially, that by definition, automation is stupid. It's not AI. I know that everybody that currently touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients. We get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition, I think, is the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. Over the past 3 years, we've managed to get machines to recognize objects in images, to correspond in natural language. And when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. Now, I would argue that humans are not that intelligent. That's a different conversation. Humans are very good at finding patterns up to about 4 dimensions, and we're very good at solving problems up to 7. Beyond that, we're pretty useless. Machines can find patterns in thousands of dimensions. They can solve problems with thousands of moving parts. Benchmarking machines against humans is a very silly thing to do. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence. Instead of using human beings as the pinnacle of intelligence, it's this. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. It's a beautiful definition. Goal-directed in the sense I'm trying to route my vehicles to maximize deliveries. I'm trying to optimize my workforce to maximize happiness. I'm trying to spend my marketing money to maximize return on investment. Behavior is how quickly I can move towards that goal. Now, we've just discovered that if you choose the wrong algorithm in your organization, even for the simplest of problems, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right algorithm, it will differentiate your organization. But the key word in this definition for me is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being honest with you all, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. Most systems in production are automation. They're not learning from their mistakes. Do you remember a few years ago, Microsoft launched a bot on Twitter? Lots of teenagers then teased that Twitter bot and became sexist and racist very quickly. That's what happens when you put systems in production that can adapt themselves. They can adapt in ways that you can't predict. So if I held what we currently do in industry to this definition, one might controversially argue that nobody's doing AI. And that's a ridiculous statement because I've built an entire career around AI. The fact is that using definitions and using technologies to think about AI is a distraction. I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about it. Before I do, a little bit of a history lesson. So this is AI in the 60s and 70s. It's Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, I can then infer that Socrates is mortal. And AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world and then trying to infer new knowledge. And it didn't really work, it didn't really scale. This will have a renaissance, by the way. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeling how brains work. So this is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 20 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. You have 85 billion brain cells. Bumblebee brains can fit on the end of a needle. They can do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds, they recognize objects, they talk to each other, they solve problems. They don't handle windows very well, but ultimately, they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million neurons in a machine? 20 years ago, we couldn't, but we can now build brains that have billions of neurons. And we currently call these large language models. Now, I would argue large language models are really good at knowing things about the world. They're really good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. And they are not good at making predictions. They are not good at making complex decisions. This is not a panacea to solve all problems across an organization. Use these brains to know things, use these technologies to reason and make decisions, and then build systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. That's the true paradigm of AI. And as I said, most organizations are a long way from this architecture. But the fact is that over the past several decades, new advances in algorithms, plus data, plus compute allow us to do some incredible things. So I look at AI not through definitions and technologies, but through applications. I believe there are 6 categories of applications of technology that can be applied to any friction across any supply chain in any industry. And that's a bold statement, but any friction that you have can be mapped to one of these 6 applications. So just very quickly, the first one is actually task automation. The fact is, if you use simple algorithms, if-then-else statements, macros, robotic process automation, if you use those simple algorithms to replace repetitive, mundane, structured tasks, you can drive a massive amount of value. You don't need to gravitate to new shiny technologies like generative AI and machine learning. The second category is content generation. Now, I sold my company to the biggest marketing company in the world. We are in the business of creating content. I think we create 1/3 of the world's marketing content. Now, everybody in the world now has the ability to create generic content, imagery, text, soon video, and soon sound. The battleground for organizations is not creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. If you go to ChatGPT and ask it about AI, it's going to give you a 101 consulting definition. It's not going to give you something that is differentiated or useful for your organization. In WPP, we create content, we call them brand brains. So we want essentially these AIs to create ads that are brand specific. I'm just going to geek out a second. There are 4 ways of making a large language model smart. A large language model is a little bit like an intoxicated graduate. And one way of making an intoxicated graduate smart is by asking it better questions. We can all learn to do better prompting, to ask better questions, to get more better answers from the AIs. But you won't be able to construct a prompt accurate enough to create a brand-specific ad, for example, with the logos and the colors. The second way of making a brain smart is a process called ragging, where you give it, in this case, your brand guidelines, your tone of voice, your values. You ask it some questions, and it looks at your brand guidelines, and it answers the questions from the materials that you've given it. This takes minutes to build. It doesn't take very long, but that will get you to only about 40% good. The third way of making a brain smart is by teaching that graduate to become a professor or an expert. Now, we know how long it takes human beings to become experts. It takes years of training and trial and error, experimentation. In our world, in the AI world, it currently takes weeks to turn an AI into a professor. When we're building brand brains, in this particular case, we actually create the 4th mechanism, which is you create a council of professors. A professor that's an expert at your imagery, your tone of voice, an expert, a professor at your values, your brand guidelines, etc., etc. You get all of these different agents, professors, collaborating, communicating to get to a much better solution. This is now called agentic computing. Different agents that have different expertise, different knowledge about the world, and the trick and the challenge is how do you get them to collaborate and communicate now to get to the best possible solution. The third category is human representation. A few years ago, I'd be talking about how we can use AI to replace people in call centers with AIs that look and behave exactly like a human being. But one of the ideas I want you to take away today is a concept that's not just applicable in marketing, but it's applicable in any industry that we call audience brains. So for the first time ever, we can actually build AIs that can recreate how people perceive content. If I show you an ad or a policy or a promotional material or any experience, historically I didn't know what goes in your mind and body unless I ask you. And people are not very good at reporting on what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, we can build brains that recreate how people think and feel about things. And that's actually a very powerful tool because we can then start to create content, test that content against these synthetic brains to then create better content, but also more accurately predict how will that content land. And unlike brand brains, where the differentiator is how you pipeline these complex technologies together, the differentiator for audience brains is data. Again, in the marketing world, there's a history of collecting email addresses and dates of birth and addresses and all that kind of stuff. That is a proxy for who you are. How you perceive something is based on whether you've just fallen in love, how much money you have in your account, the time of the day, the weather, how well your football team played at the weekend. Understanding the data that you need to represent audiences is actually very, very hard. And one of the things that we're doing in WPP is we're creating brains that don't just represent target audiences. We build brains that essentially represent every corner of society. You can build a brain that represents a culture or a minority group or a political party or a newspaper or some sort of sustainability claims framework or an ad claims framework. And when we're creating content across our supply chain, we can show that content to these council of responsible AIs to identify if we're going to trigger any communities, break any laws, or cause any harm. In a world where we create content much more quickly because of AI, we need a mechanism to test whether that content is safe and responsible. The fourth category is what people called AI before generative AI 4 years ago. This is machine learning, it's data science. You already know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't typically lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is not actually making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks, likes, and sales. But machine learning can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. Now, it's a terrible example, but the point is no human being would be able to identify that complex correlation. Machine learning is really, really good at surfacing those insights to allow us to know things about the world, to allow us to make better decisions. The fifth category I've already mentioned, complex decision making. And just to remind you all how complex decisions are. So these are 5 staff members. Imagine we need to allocate these 5 staff members to 5 jobs. So how many possible ways can I allocate 5 people to 5 jobs? Do you remember? 5 factorial, 5 times 4 times 3 times. So 120 possible ways that I can allocate 5 people to 5 jobs. Let's make the problem a little bit more complicated. We've got 15 people. How many ways can I allocate 15 people to 15 jobs? Don't say 15 factorial, that's cheating. What does your fast brain say? How many ways can I allocate 15 people to 15 jobs, roughly? It's over 1 trillion possible solutions. So to expect a human to solve this problem, we are wasting our time. One rule to take away today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. An industry don't have problems of this size, they've got problems of this size. So here are 500 staff members. Can you tell me how many ways? No, you can't, it's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things that you have to consider, 60 vehicles to route, 60 staff members to allocate, 60 pieces of content to allocate to marketing channels, you've got more possible solutions than there are atoms in the universe. You'll find that in most organizations, these problems are being solved badly by human beings or also badly by algorithms. You have to choose the right algorithm to be able to solve these problems well. The 6th category is human augmentation. So again, a few years ago, I'd be talking about how we could use exoskeletons and cybernetics to make ourselves faster, better, and stronger. One of the things that we're doing with one of the biggest brands in the world, I can't tell you who, this is going to sound really creepy, but for each one of their marketing team, we create a digital twin of that person. A large language model that's trained on their email, their calendar, their feedback. And what we can do is we can ask that digital you, if I put you on this project, will you work well? If I put you on this team, will you thrive? And that's actually being embraced by those employees because they feel like their digital twin represents them better than 5 numbers in a HR database. And it really does. So what we're starting to see is now these models of you in your professional lives being used for resourcing, career development, and all that kind of stuff, which I think is very powerful. We're also building digital twins of our personal selves. You might not know this, but if you have an assistant on your phone or a co-pilot, they're not really assistants, they're not really co-pilots, they're digital yous. They're learning off your data, they're trying to understand your preferences, your personality, and us actually, as a marketing community, need to figure out not only how do we market to human beings, we need to figure out how do we capture the attention of AIs, which is going to be a very interesting paradigm. So anyway, I love these categories because they also help you navigate this complex world of AI safety, security, ethics, and governance. There's a huge amount of misunderstanding, misinformation, scaremongery associated with AI. There are broadly 3 questions you need to ask yourself when implementing AI safely. The first question is the intent appropriate? And this is an ethical question. I know there's lots of people that have rebranded themselves as AI ethicists. I would argue there's no such thing as AI ethics. Ethics is the study of right and wrong. And the difference between AIs and human beings is that AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent. And it's the intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. And there are already well-established frameworks and structures to scrutinize intent. The second question is a safety question, which is, are my algorithms explainable? The difference between software and AI really is that AIs are opaque in terms of how they make their decisions. We don't necessarily know how they're making their decisions. If you can make them explainable, then you solve a lot of those words. Most of those words go away. Transparency, auditability, responsibility, all that kind of stuff. Making them explainable solves a lot of problems. The third question you need to ask yourself is interesting. It's not what happens if my AI goes wrong. It's what happens if my AI goes very right. For the first time ever, we can deploy technology that can massively overachieve its goal. As engineers, we identify failure points and we try to mitigate those failure points. But we now have to ask ourselves, what happens if this AI overachieves its goal? There's a human bias called homophily, which is we tend to like to engage with and trust people that look and sound like us. And if I let AI loose to optimize ads, to create ads, you end up with a world of you selling to you. Now that might be very good for business, but it might not be very good in terms of enforcing social bubbles and biases and bigotry. In fact, actually, one of my clients is a large audit firm. They have 5,000 auditors they need to allocate to a demand, 5,000 factorial. They used to have 40 people whose full-time job it was to try and solve that maths problem. And they said, Daniel, can you build an algorithm, an AI, that can solve this problem better than a human being? And if you can increase utilization, so if you can unlock billable hours by about 2%, this project will pay for itself. So we built an algorithm that took 2 hours to solve that problem instead of 40 people's full-time job. And not only did it unlock 2%, it unlocked 12% utilization. Now, of course, that business was rubbing their hands together. This was going to be driving hundreds of millions of dollars of unlocked opportunity. But if you looked at the plans, it would mean that people would be driving longer distances to clients, clients wouldn't be getting the continuity that they wanted, employees wouldn't be having time to train. So by overachieving the goal in one KPI, you end up causing harm in other KPIs. But what AI can do, AI can actually elevate the performance of all of the KPIs. It's really important to think about that. So as far as I'm concerned, there are 3 types of AI risk. There's how do we deploy these technologies safely and responsibly in production? We've already talked about this. The second is malicious risk. So how do we prevent bad actors from creating pathogens and cyber attacks? And as far as I'm concerned, this is the role of the government. And then there are finally macro risks, which I'll talk about later on, the impact that these technologies are going to have on society. I don't know if you know who said this, the nation that leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. Do you know who said that? Yeah. Who was it? Putin. It was Vladimir Putin recently. I think we need to acknowledge that these technologies are not just going to have the most profound impact on business, they're going to have the most profound impact on society, and hopefully I'm going to convince you of that. So I would also argue that organizations are not only just solving problems across their supply chain, using AI to make things more efficient, more effective, but they're also trying to create a digital simulation of their entire organization. We We call this, again, a digital twin. If I go to a retailer now and say, look, I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand by 10%, will you be able to tell me, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough distribution drivers? Do you have enough people in your stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? Most organizations can't project these questions across their supply chains. But that's ultimately what we're trying to build. It makes you incredibly efficient if you can do that. I would argue there are three types of digital twins. One is the flow of goods across your supply chain. The second one is back office processes. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. I think most of us know that these back office processes are bureaucratic. They're a hindrance to innovation. AI is not only making them more efficient, they're changing the way that we do back office processes. So in most companies, you would go to your manager and say, I want to go to a conference like this. It would probably either go up an email chain to some accountant, and some accountant will say yes or no, and they don't know what they're saying yes or no to. They don't know if it's a good decision. In Gore-Tex, the clothing company, what they do is they let people expense whatever they want, but all of their expenses are publicly available. And so what happens is people self-police each other, which I think is a much more humane, more effective way of doing expenses. The final digital twin is your workforce. It's that liquid layer of skills, hopes, dreams, desires that you need to allocate on top of these organizational systems. I want to double click on this a second because it's really important. So I'm sure you don't have any problems like this in your organization, but this is a hierarchy. And hierarchies breed certain types of interesting relationships. And I would argue that these structures are not conducive for adaptation. Remember, the faster you can adapt to a changing world, the more intelligent you are. So organizations are trying to then embrace these types of structures: agile, scrum, design thinking. And the principle behind these organizational structures, whilst more complex, they allow your organization to innovate. The faster you can innovate, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. And actually, I would even go so far to say that organizations are not just moving from hierarchical structures to flat structures, but they're also trying to create what are called liquid organizations. So let me give you an example of what that means. So one of the things that I used to do in my company before I realized it was illegal is that we used to make everybody make public recommendations for their salary. So everybody would publicly declare what they want to be paid, and then people would then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we would use AI to determine how many votes one person has for another. If I've worked very closely with you over the past year, if I'm very knowledgeable about your domain, I will have more votes for you than somebody else. So I had interns voting on people's salaries that were more weighted than me because they were better placed to make that decision. Now that sounds crazy, but the reality is that most decisions are made in a hierarchy, and I think most of us know that hierarchies are not the best structure for decision making. What AI is enabling us to do is to identify the best diverse group of experts, agents, get them to swarm around the decision and make better decisions. That's, I think, the future of how organizations need to operate. So I would argue there are, I love this definition, by the way, of Steve Jobs for innovation. He said that innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is generating ideas and getting them to the point where they're driving value. And that process is long and hard and painful. What we want to do is shorten that process. The faster we can innovate, the more intelligent we are. And I think in the age of AI, there are three differentiators for an organization. The first differentiator is data. If you have data that contains insights that are better than your competition, then you are at an advantage. It's data that makes the AI smart. The second differentiator is AI talent. Now, most organizations think they can attract deep mind talent. They can't. But you need to figure out how do you engage with people that have decades of experience in understanding how to build AI innovations. Because if you're just working with people that have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 5 years, then you're not going to differentiate yourself. So how do you figure out who's an expert and how do you get them to build innovations? And the final differentiator is you. It's leadership. It's people that are making decisions. If you don't understand the transformational power of these technologies, then we are wasting our time. We get seduced by new technologies and we try to apply those technologies to solving problems across our organization. And then when it doesn't work, people blame the technology. They say, oh, there's an AI hype. And it's not that AI hype. It's because people don't understand how to apply these technologies in the right way, or they're applying the wrong technologies to solving the wrong problems. And hopefully that framework that I've given you is a good place to start about how do I apply technology in the right way. Okay, let's talk about the impact. So you've already heard Brian Cox talk about singularity. It comes from physics. It's a point in time that we can't see beyond, the end of time. But it was adopted by the AI community to refer to the technological singularity, which is the point in time where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than us. We have no idea what happens beyond that point. I actually think there are at least 6 singularities that we need to be thinking about. And I've tried to use the pestle framework to capture them. So just very quickly, the political singularity is a post-truth world, a world where we no longer know what is true. So AI, misinformation, bots, deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, and they continue to challenge our political foundations, but they're also challenging the fabric of our reality. With a few seconds of your voice and a few images, I can clone you, and I can use that clone to commit fraud and all that kind of stuff. And actually, the CEO of WPP was cloned 4 months ago. Somebody tried to use his clone to create a board meeting to commit fraud. I actually think that our industry can solve that problem, but we do need to mitigate this risk of a world where people don't know what is true. The environmental singularity, we've talked a lot already today about this. So as far as I'm concerned, AI is increasing consumption. And I think that actually consumption usually gives people access to goods and services that typically enrich their lives. We know it's putting pressure on our planetary boundaries, but I know that if we apply AI in the right way, we get at least half the amount of energy that we need to run this planet. And the reason why I know that is because when I go and solve Tesco's last mile delivery problem or workforce planning for PwC, any project that I've done over the past 17 years, we typically reduce the carbon by at least 25% and unlock more capacity. Now, if you can then start to also co-optimize across your supply chain, instead of just one part of it, you can unlock even more carbon. We could run this planet easily on the resources that we currently have. This is not my expertise, but there are scientists that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is advancing medicine. It's able to monitor ourselves and clean ourselves out. And a bit like a car, if you stay on top of damage, that car will never, ever break down. And I don't know what the world will look like when we realize there are people amongst us that won't have to die. In fact, actually, I just signed up to a website called tomorrow.bio. So for the price of a cappuccino a week, $25 a month, you can freeze yourself if you die. They don't know how to wake you up yet, but the point is that for a commodity, you can now potentially cheat death. The technological singularity I've spoken about briefly, but this is when we become the second most intelligent species on the planet. Now, my community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 40, 50 years. We think it might now happen in the next 10 or 20 years. And we don't know if it's going to be the most glorious thing that happens to us or our biggest existential threat. My advice to people is that when it comes, look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. That's why I hope it will happen. And actually, one of the things that I think is going to become really important over the next several years is this idea of AI consciousness. So human beings are going to start to attribute consciousness to things that are not conscious, build relationships with them, et cetera, which will have some social problems. We also might be building AIs that are conscious and not realizing it and putting them in harm. And there's a concept called mind crime where we have a duty of care not just to ourselves and to animals, but we potentially have a duty of care to AIs. But what I'm interested in is how can we align AIs with a moral system? How can we build AIs that encode and embed morality in its DNA, rather than what we're currently doing now, which is we're building big brains, large language models, and then we're playing whack-a-mole to try and make sure that they're safe, which is a very stupid thing to do. So how can we essentially align AI with some sort of moral system? And I can talk about that in the Q&A if you want. And actually, if you're interested, there's a new emerging technology. So large language models are horrendously energy inefficient. They take a long time to learn. They require a lot of data to train. Your brains operate on the power of a light bulb. And you learn very, very quickly. You adapt very quickly, which is what's special about biology and human beings. And actually, there's these new emerging technologies called neuromorphic AIs, which are much more modeled on how our brains work. And those neuromorphic technologies are going to spawn the robotic revolution over the next 10 years. The legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. So again, I'm now in the business of understanding how people perceive content. I'm also in the business of understanding how to influence people. And that is a very powerful position to be in. And we need to do that safely and responsibly, but we also need to mitigate bad actors from using these technologies to accumulate a massive amount of wealth and power. And again, I think that my industry can solve this problem. My final singularity is my favorite singularity. It's coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. I'd highly recommend his books. So I can't talk about AI without talking about jobs. Now, for the past 17 years, I've been building AI solutions that have freed people from mundane, repetitive tasks. They have not lost their jobs. They've gone on to do more important, impactful things. Over the next 10 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of the same. I don't think people will lose their jobs, but there'll be new opportunities for people to contribute, to innovate. Jobs will be displaced and disrupted, but humanity will grow. And AI is like an energy source that will allow us to grow. Beyond 10 years, I don't think anybody knows what they're talking about. And just to give you the two extremes of the argument, the one extreme is that when we can free up whole jobs, we probably will. The capitalistic model of reducing costs, increasing profits means that we'll free up people, and if that happens very quickly, our economies might not be able to rebalance fast enough, and it will lead to social unrest. And I actually think we need to lean in and figure out how to mitigate some of the risks associated with that. There is the opposite side of this spectrum, which is very controversial, bear with me, which is we should be accelerating as fast as possible towards this singularity. We should be automating the friction from the creation and dissemination of goods, food, healthcare, education, energy, transport, bringing the cost of those goods down to zero. So imagine being born into a world where you don't have access to paid work, but everything that you need to survive and thrive is abundant. Now people say to me, Daniel, what would I do if I didn't have a job? A job defines who I am as a human being. You'll probably be an academic, but most of the people I don't know that don't have jobs, they're not sitting at home bored and depressed. They're using their time and their energy to try and contribute to humanity. So I'm going to ask you a question. What would you do if you didn't have to do paid work and everything was abundant? Everything was free. What would you do? Golf is usually the first answer I get. Travel, indulge in your hobbies, read, play chess. By the way, AIs can play chess better than us. We've got more people playing chess now than ever before. What else would you do? Huh? Volunteer. You push people hard enough, they say the same thing, which I want to do something that contributes somehow to humanity. We'll do all of those things, but we all have, I think, an innate desire to want to make the world better. And I think, unfortunately, we're all born into economic constraints preventing us from doing that. If we apply AI in the right way, we can create a world where people are free. And I'm just going to close by saying it's not good enough for organizations just to have a strong, profitable business. You need to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract AI talent, and you're not going to attract customers. I joined WPP because I believe in its purpose. It's to use the power of creativity to make the world better. And I think a better world is a world where everybody is economically free to contribute to humanity however they want. And I actually think it's enterprise that will create this world. If you think about the purpose of your enterprise, if you think about the purpose of the brands that you consume from, if AI can help them achieve their purpose, and if we can hold them to account, it's a collective purpose of enterprise that makes the world better for all of us. So on that note, I'm going to thank you all, and I think I've got 5 minutes for questions. Thank you. First question I usually get is, am I a communist? I'm not a communist, no. I'm happy to lean into that, yes.
Daniel, we're in the great institution of Queen's University. Where's it going to be in 5 years' time in your world?
Oh, it's a great question. I have one foot in academia, and I'm a huge fan of the kind of, I guess, the two strands of academia. One is educating the next generation, and the other one is pushing the boundaries and doing what Brian said, which is exploring things that we don't necessarily know what is valuable. So I think we need to give more and more freedom to people to do that. I think the challenge right now is that when we're trying to educate the next generation, we've historically educated them by giving them tests, testing their knowledge. That is now challenging because of ChatGPT. And what I'd like to see, and I don't know how well this will happen, but if you think about the things that you value in yourself and the things that you value in human beings, it's your resilience, your robustness, your creativity, your ability to adapt in adverse situations. So how can we change our education systems so that they are applying knowledge in those types of situations? And it requires effort, but I think that that's really what people will value. So I think more and more, hopefully, people will be free to push the boundaries of the knowledge of humanity, but I also think we need to figure out how do we cultivate not just the storage of knowledge in people, but the ability to be creative and robust and resilient, because the world is going to be changing dramatically over the next decade.
Thank you for a terrific explanation.
Yep.
In your chart on safety, security, governance, and ethics, you said if we had explainability,
yes,
many of these would go away.
Yes.
Can you unpack the downside of explainability?
Yeah, so let me go back to the, so I guess there's two types of very, very simply, there's two types of AI. There's AI that's kind of probabilistic, in terms of its statistical representation of the world, and there are mechanisms to try to understand how they are making their correlations, and you can sort of draw them out, which is one mechanism for explainability. I argue that most organizations actually have decision problems, and decision making, as I said, is an optimization problem, and optimization is much more explainable than statistics. And let me give you an example. If I go to the allocation of resource example, let's imagine you're trying to optimize for, increasing utilization, lowering travel time, et cetera, and some boss comes along and says, no, I want that person on my project instead of the project that you've allocated them to. We can then run that scenario in our engine and say, by the way, this will have a reduction in our revenue, and they won't be able to get their career development. So that's a mechanism to show explainability. I hope that helps. So.
Okay, I'd just like to ask you about the economic singularity and how it relates to intellectual property, because as an economist, I guess we know that some people are going to be able to control the technology and have much better technology than other people. And we know that there are two ways of protecting intellectual property. Of course, there's patents and other things, but there's the practice of things. And how do we stop a sort of monopoly on AI? Because I think this is really the big question.
That's a great question. So, interestingly, what we're seeing is an impulse for some organizations to open source. And so Google and Microsoft, they sell cloud usage via people using the AI, the large language models, and that's how they generate a lot of their revenues. The reason why Meta can open source their models is not for the goodness of their own heart, but it's because they look cool. It doesn't affect their revenue model at all, but it also allows them to access data. And so I think that what we're going to start to see is more and more open source organizations using that model as a way of competing against organizations that might have a monopoly, because it gets you access to two things. It might not get access to revenues, but it gets access to talent, and it gets you access to data. And actually, I try to encourage when I build an innovation for an organization, they usually say, well, we're going to keep our arms around this and leverage this innovation for as long as possible. And the fact is let's go back to last mile delivery. I built Tesco's last mile delivery solution. And the fact is that, in a few years' time, Amazon might come along, throw more money at the problem, and be able to compete against that last mile delivery solution. The best thing Tesco can do is open source that last mile delivery solution, making it available to Amazon, to Sainsbury's, to all of their competitors, but also get access to the data, get access to the talent. They then, in some respects, they monopolize, but that innovation becomes free to everybody. Like if you're a hospital in India, you can use that technology to route your ambulances. So you've got this interesting model of open source creating a world of abundance as well. And I think what I'd like to see is this start to happen in the physical world. So I don't know how many mobile phones you go through a year. I probably go through one mobile phone a year. But if we gave those mobile phones to people that didn't have mobile phones, and if we had those people be able to access the internet, which in theory should become very cheap because of Starlink and things, then what I would argue is that education becomes free. Pretty much everything we need to learn is on the internet, and also people will access these large language models for pretty much free. So you end up giving people the ability to educate themselves and use probably the most powerful technology we've ever created for essentially free. I don't think that this concept of abundance is that far away if we apply ourselves in the right way.
Thank you very much for that wonderful session. For years, we had this tension between parametric and non-parametric methods. And at some point, I thought the parametric was better. And where does the AI leave that tension today? Now we're moving toward the non-parametric in the world of analytics.
I guess so. Are we talking here about sub-symbolic and symbolic? Is that simply, yeah, okay. So This also relates back to, I guess, Daniel Kahneman's thinking fast and slow. So there's a sort of, large language models or neural networks are statistically in their nature. I can show it lots of pictures of oranges, and it builds a statistical model of an orange. So we can use these models to create axioms, truths about the world. I'm pretty confident that that's an orange. I'm pretty confident that's a chair. But to be able to reason with that, we need to be able to then do system 2 thinking, which is symbolic thinking. So I think that my guess would be that ChatGPT 01, the reason why we've gone from an IQ of 80 to an IQ of 120 is the ability to reason. Reasoning, again, if you're old enough, you'll have seen AI go through multiple cycles. 70 years ago, it was little brains, perceptrons, and then it was what are called multi-agent systems, and then it was brains, and then it was multi-agent systems, and now it's brains, now it's going to multi-agent systems. Essentially, each agent has different pieces of knowledge about the world based on its experience, and then what you want to do is you want to get these agents arguing and collaborating to generate new knowledge. So Socrates, one agent will know that Socrates is a man, another agent will know that all men are mortal based on its statistical experience, but if they can reason, they'll be able to now say that Socrates is a man, and that's new knowledge. So I think that we need to have both of these types of approaches to make it more powerful. Yep.
So I had a question for you. One might argue that today generative AI is just giving the ability to synthesize and extrapolate the knowledge that went into the large language model today.
That's right, yeah.
Going back to our earlier lecture, we talked about how the world really completely changed through the genius of an individual who thought outside the box, Einstein in that case. Yeah. Do you foresee a day where an AI is any more than extrapolation of accumulated human knowledge, where it can actually create new theories as Einstein did for us?
Yeah, my guess will be, and this is how I'm tracking the intelligence of AI, so my guess would be that right now I would argue that these AIs are intoxicated graduates, so they're really only regurgitating what they've been told. And what I'm seeing now is, we're seeing them graduate to master's level, so they have the ability to reason. My guess is that in 18 months, 2 years, maybe 18 months, we'll have a PhD level where we'll be able to give it a complex problem. It'll be able to break the problem down, create hypotheses, experiments to solve that problem, and then bring it together. Another 18 months, we'll have a postdoc, and another 18 months, we'll have a professor. So my guess will be that by the end of this decade, we'll have a professor in our pocket. And I don't know how quickly that will percolate into the world, but I don't think I've answered your question there. Yes, large language models at the moment are essentially regurgitating the data that they've been given it. But just going back to this idea of, if you know that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, based on the data that you've been given, you can infer that Socrates is mortal. You can come up with new data confidently using logic and inference and experimentation. So when we start to get these AIs to do science, I think we'll be able to create new knowledge.
That's okay. My question will take time. So.
I've been chased off. Yes. One more thing.
Thank you for this. It was wonderful. When you say that singularity, the social singularity is long living, if not curing death.
Yes.
And economic singularity, it is to replace human by machine labor.
Yeah.
Will this not create a huge sector of the population which is idle and which is deprived? So would not the social singularity could be the implosion of the humankind?
Could be, or it could not. So I guess, I don't think that people are idle when they become free. I think that there's this myth that people are idle. I don't think people are. Most of the people I know that have become economically free are not wasting their time. And maybe you think about, anecdotally about yourself and other people that you know. And so I actually think that people will want to do stuff that has a positive impact on humanity. And I just want to say, I don't care about the people that have lots and lots of wealth. I care about these people that are living on $1 a day. Right? What we need to do is we need to free those people economically so that they can contribute to humanity. That's what I care about. Once you reach a certain amount of wealth and stuff, you don't need more stuff. I know we see it on the internet, but the fact is, if you have another bedroom or another car, another garage to clean, it's a burden. Right? Having more stuff at a certain point, and that point is not very high, is a burden. And what matters is human connections, relationships, and genuine, authentic experiences. And I think that comes from contributing to humanity. That's it. Okay, thank you.
Daniel, thank you so much. I was going to come across and shake your hand, but we really enjoyed that, and it's a truly interesting and thought-provoking session, and thanks for answering so many questions too. And I'm sure that will be food for thought for many of you over lunch, but we haven't quite got there yet. So I'd just like you right this minute, before we get to that stage, to welcome back to the platform here Chad Holliday Jr. and Deborah Wynne-Smith.
I promise it'll just be a few minutes before lunch. And we have one particular thing that Deborah and I would like to share with you that the Global Federation has been working on. And that's our call to action. Achieving sustainable future for all. And so I'm literally going to have a call for action. What we have, and it's available online to you, is 10 actions that the 35 countries that are part of the GFCC have all agreed to are appropriate now. And under each of the 10 actions, we have some strategies, about 6 or 7 strategies, is a ways to actually accomplish that. So as a group yesterday, we challenged ourselves to each one personally, for ourselves, for our organization, to pick out one of the actions and one of the strategies of that action, and before Christmas, be committed to making that happen over the next year. And it was a little bit of inspiring. People kind of got excited about doing that. What we'd like to do is challenge everybody in the room to join us in doing the same thing. So to give you a feel, the first action is boost the productivity and regeneration of natural resources. One of the strategies for that is equitable benefit sharing, which is focused on share globally, but particularly with the people that are directly impacted by the extraction of those natural resources that so many times are left behind, and general equality of use of that. So it's a pretty, it gives you a feel for an action and what a strategy would be. Now, yesterday I said if anybody has actually completed one, knows what they want to do, they would have a chance to share it in this room here today. Sir Ian, I believe you have one, and I think someone has a microphone. If you'd stand up, they'll bring a microphone to you, and you have a chance to share the action and strategy that you'd like to go with. Would that be okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Yes, yesterday Alex Subich from Aston and I thought that we should focus on number 10, which is the pledge about using education to drive innovation. And we would do that through a joint PhD programme that we have between Aston and Belfast that we signed the MOU for recently, and we will link these PhDs to industry or business experience. So we think that's one way in which we can drive the education and innovation agenda.
Great. That's a fantastic one. And Bill, they obviously didn't think of that just yesterday. They had thought of it sometime before. But as you think about yours, you might think about something you already wanted to work on, and does this help you crystallize it? So, Peter, did you have one? Yeah, I don't think we have the video. You just need a microphone.
Thank you, Chad. So come and see me after. We've developed a new technology for augmented reality in Southampton in my group. We're commercializing that, and we're going on this journey to make truly transparent AR glasses. I was hoping we'd get a video, but I think we're short of time before lunch. But the key thing here is to develop all of these challenges that Chad's talked about, all of these calls to action. All of them require us to interface and to bring on side that interface between computing and the interface between humans. And so there's a big step here which I'd like to share with you, and I'd like to share the journey I'm going on around how we use that technology to develop augmented reality. So what I mean is we can look in this room and we can see all of the information we currently have on our phones. So please come and talk to me afterwards. And I think this is something which can impact on all of these challenges.
Great, Peter. I think what this represents is there's obviously some of the largest companies in the world trying to do the same thing Peter's doing, but he's got a little different idea. And I wouldn't rule Peter out of getting it. So if you have a chance to talk to him later today, I think that'd be very useful. And the last one I know of is Chad Evans.
Thanks, Chad. I'm with the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. We are launching, actually we have launched, but we'll be continuing it for the next 2 to 3 years, a series of regional innovation summits across the United States. We call them competitiveness conversations. So our commitment to the GFCC and to the broader community who's with us today is to come on our journey with us, join us in those conversations. With Deborah, we have committed to addressing nearly every single one of the goals in this document in each of those conversations, uncovering next and best practices that are happening around the United States that could be scaled for global solutions. And so we look forward to working with everyone on addressing, but in particular, number 5, how do we nurture and really support place-based and place-making innovation?
Thank you, Chip. The whole idea here is not just put out a lot of nice actions that people maybe only read. It's how to make it personal, how to really take one of these and make a difference in the world, and make a difference in the world in the next year. So it's very real, very tangible. And we hope this will be useful to you. I do urge you to look at it. Deborah, over to you. Oh, please.
Thank you very much. I wanted to go back to number 10 on educations and leveraging education for sustainable development and economic transformations. I think along with Deborah, I've been thinking about what she called the African Engineering Initiative to really close the gap in engineering and sciences to make sure that Africa entered the path of sustainable development. I think it's something very personal that we're going to pursue, leveraging institutions in the US and research laboratory to close that gap within the African continent. It is something that must be done. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Are there any others that people want to share now? Thank you. Deborah?
Thank you, Chad. And I'll just add one more from the U.S. Council on Competitiveness. Under our National Commission on Innovation and Competitiveness Frontiers, we'll be releasing our new strategy for our administration and Congress around the imperative, 10X imperative for innovation, but also a new initiative on the bioeconomy. And all of these principles and recommendations have an impact in the new bioeconomy that will certainly transform and drive sustainability and inclusivity. I just want to share with everyone that this product of the GFCC has been something that we have co-created with our members since our inception almost 15 years ago. And the theme each year relates to the theme of our summit. So I want to thank Sir Ian Greer in Queens and you, Stephen Kingan, and the Competitiveness Center for helping us design this theme and co-create the summit. But then the whole GFCC community contributed very much to building out these principles and recommendations. And they really constitute a complex system for driving prosperity and sustainable growth. So we urge everyone, read these. They're very powerful, but take them back to your political leaders, to your business leaders, to your academic leaders, and civil society. And when you have the opportunity to speak and engage, build these into your talks because they are something that can lead to change and solution. And we were watching the fantastic presentation before we came out, and I love the quote from Edward Deci, "Motivation is the energy for action." And I would add to that leadership also is an energy for action, and everyone in this room are leaders. So thank you all for your contributions to this, and we look forward to next year when we come together. I know you're going to hold us accountable, Chad, as our chairman, to see what we've accomplished. Thank you.
Deborah, Chad, thank you both very much indeed. and you very neatly brought us to lunchtime, which I'm sure everyone's glad to hear. We're going to break for an hour for lunch. There are wayfinders, people who will show you the way to go. They'll be at the front steps of the Whitla Hall here to take you to the marquee for lunch. It's a lovely day outside, so if you have a coat with you and feel like a bit of a stroll as well, Botanic Gardens is just behind us, and it's really nice. Otherwise, I'll see you back here in an hour's time. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you.